Welcome to Podcetera. Each episode is a journey of discovery as we delve into topics that pique our curiosity and yours. We feature in-depth interviews with fascinating individuals who have extraordinary stories to share.
I'm René Lego.
And I'm Joël Ludovich. And this
is Podcetera. Welcome to Podcetera. We are so happy that you could join us for a chat. This is quite a reversal where the host becomes the guest and the producers become the interviewers, as we used to be your producers many moons ago. You have a really long and esteemed career. I'm not going to give your entire resume because you would be better at giving that, but I'll just expand on it a little bit and then you can go further. You're a world-renowned global philosopher, author, spiritual activist. You're the Margaret Guest Professor of Global Philosophy at Haverford. You've taught there for over 56 years, and you've authored several books, and you're the founder-director of the Global Dialogue Institute. You were the host of Philly Live with us, so tell us more about your career.
Thank you both. This brings back wonderful memories. You set the stage well by giving some of the background. Thank you for doing that, René. As a global philosopher, that's a new field of research. I am appointed in Haverford College after many decades, which was founded by the Quakers outside of Philadelphia. As a Margaret Guest Professor of Global Philosophy, Margaret Guest was this visionary woman, spiritual artist, who in the 40s and 50s, her father was an eminent judge in Philadelphia, Marshall Guest. She left her estate to the college to found a center to bring the world religions and traditions and cultures together in dialogue, to celebrate diversity and explore the possibility of unity, quote unquote. And I'm the Margaret Guest Professor. And there's a center at Haverford College called the Margaret Guest Center for Dialogue Across Borders. When I arrived for my doctorate, I got my doctorate in philosophy from Brandeis. By the way, I was born in Trinidad, lived in Jamaica, came to New York City as a boy, a New York City kid, went to Brandeis for my doctorate, focused on logic and the science of being, ontology, with amazing professors at Brandeis, and then came to Haverford College in 1968. And the main passion I had was to see as a philosopher that the logic in the West, in Europe, was now polarized between the classical Aristotelian logic that shaped the European culture and imagination for over 2,000 years, and the birth of a new mathematical instrument, a mathematical logic, that was discovered by Bertrand Russell and came back to Cambridge, and it just exploded into the modern analytic revolution of the new logic, and it was like a manic high, that we finally found the missing code for logic, which is like the structure of reason and being. But I saw with my mentor at Brandeis that, wait, you can't close the door on the classical logic. So he showed that you can't do that. You'd lose fundamental powers to understand cultures and worlds. And so I said, how can logic, the science of logos, the name in the Greek for reason, if reason is polarized, then we're in trouble because there's no coherence. It's relativism. There's no fundamental truth. There's no coherence to human cultures and life. And if there is no fundamental unifying force, when I arrived at Haverford, my main passion was, how do we cross different worldviews? They're profoundly different. I saw that in the research of Brandeis. When you're living in the biblical world, the mental space, the mental map of the mind that we're raised in the biblical world shows up on the screen of our awareness. So that's one world. But if we're in physics and I'm in the Big Bang, and matter is the origin, not let there be light, but from spirit, but matter evolved in the Big Bang, and here we are. Those are very different grammars of worldviews. They don't speak the same language. And when you're in one, you can't understand the other. Make it even worse. If I'm in the European mind, can I enter the Buddha mind in the Far East? Can I go into the yoga space? Can I go into Lao Tzu, the Chinese classical calling out to Tao, which is what? The fundamental field. So my question and passion when I arrived at Haverford was, we must find a way to understand how do we negotiate across profoundly different worldviews that are worlds apart. Because if we can't, we're in trouble. So I was looking for coherence. And while a boy walking the streets of New York with foreign philosophy, I was delivering liquor to people in apartments. And I had a very powerful experience walking and looking at all of these apartments above me in the high-rise on the West End Avenue in New York. So how many people are suffering? I didn't understand alcoholism. People are sad. And I tried to imagine more than one apartment. And then my hair started to stand up at the red light right across the street. What's going on? I had goosebumps. Something hit me. Then around 13, 14, I started writing a show. Always follow the universal light. Stay in the universal light. Live in the universal light. I didn't know what that meant. And it took me years to realize that's what Logos was calling me. That was a fundamental field. A philosophy was calling me. Sophia was reaching out to me. I didn't understand that. So fast forward, my quest for the last 50, 60 years, living in these different worlds, is seeing, wow, they're all saying that there's a fundamental field. It's called first philosophy. And they're all in different ways. There's Socrates saying, we're living in the cave. We've got to leave the cave and come into the Logos and know thyself. It's one call. Buddha is saying, if you're living in a degraded space, you're going to fragment and suffer. You've got to come into the Buddha space. Yoga, you're going to break down unless you come into the Om. And all of these great philosophers are saying, make the crossing. But there was no way to hear in the language we're using, what crossing are they talking about? Do I have to give up my ego? Do I have to give up my desires? No, it's deeper than that. What is it? When are we in the adolescent stage of using our mind that they're talking about? That's chopping us up and fragmenting, causing great human suffering. That is medically hurtful because our being is ill. That's called medical ontology. Ontos is being. If your being is ill, you can't have well-being, which is happiness. What are these teachers calling us to make a crossing from a code we hadn't really marked to cross into a deeper language, a deeper code that was missing but always there? And I call that the logosphere. Use the word reason. Not in the box, but you have to go deeper. So I introduce markers, notation, to know when folks living in the egosphere, we can't find love, we can't reach each other, we can't dialogue, we're in monologue. So how do we go into a healthy human space? Who's a human? Are we in the Lego space? I want to be careful about using that word, Renee. You're a Logos, or crossing into the Logos, into the Sophia space. To me, discovering and bringing in the notation is a game changer, because now we can look back and say, wow, if we introduce that code marker for our great teachings and scriptures, we'll have a whole different culture waiting. Because when Jesus is saying, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and then John is saying in the beginning is the Logos. Logos in the Greek means the infinite source of the rational light that turns on the light so we can even have experience and even be. Without that light on of Logos, rational beings, we're Logos kids. Right? So when John is saying in the beginning is the Logos, that the Logos was with God, Logos was God, and it became flesh in Jesus. That was Logos speaking. He wasn't speaking Google space. He was speaking Christ's voice. And people didn't get it.
Explain to us Google space. What does that mean?
It's a metaphor for everyday information. We say we live in the information age. That's old. What is information? To think is to form sentences to describe the world. Sun is shining, a dinosaur is coming, danger is here, whatever it is. We form sentences in our minds. Aristotle, in founding logic, the science of reason and language and meaning, saw that to think is to predicate, to join a subject and a predicate, union, makes sense. We have a sentence that has meaning, and I can picture a fact, and we can describe the world. So a thinker can use sentences and language and logic to picture the world. There we are. Voila, we got it. And I can have the laws of reason. And he says the law is A. Everything has its name, every unit. We've got units like atomic pieces, like Lego blocks, right? And that's that technology. And it's powerful. And that's information. So the information technology is that we couldn't live and survive without having information. And it's great, don't put it down. But if we cut off the information from the source of information, from the double bracket logosphere, from the light of reason, if we get cut off from the light of reason, then we're in a kind of mental cave. And we have great information, but it's mind bites. It's separate pieces. And if we're living in separate pieces, then one worldview or narrative is going to be alien to another. And you could have different ideologies or narratives you're living by, but all in the same thought space of ordinary everyday logic. And that's information. And so when we get to centuries later, computers to advance the information, that's Google space. And you can Google any philosopher now or any person on the web and get information. That's Google space. It's using old logic of to think is to predicate and have a sentence that makes sense. And they stand independently, and every word has its own. So Socrates is one word, wise is another. I can join Socrates is wise. Sentence, wow. All of these Lego pieces we can put together and make thoughts. And they picture the world, and they represent and picture. But when philosophers go into the deep space, they say, this is not language picturing reality. This is language disclosing itself. When Jesus says, I am the way, he's not representing some fact in Google space. He's presenting the truth of the Logos. When Buddha takes us into the deeper Buddha space, he's not speaking Google predication language. The Google age was starting way back then. We just have computers to do it. It means information processing. And if you look now at the state of the USA and the media, We have AI and disinformation. Look at these deep fakes, trauma of AI. Google Space is already AI.
How does the development of artificial intelligence challenge our understanding of consciousness and the nature of being?
Thank you for that simple question. That's so sweet. That's the ultimate question. And what I'm doing is going to really help us, because when you realize that as great as what I call information, the predication, a subject and predicate, a thinker is using thoughts and forming it, and all of our languages are using that, and our culture comes from that, because one of the great formulas that come out is how we use our mind, that's what we get. In other words, we are as we mind. And if we're using a Lego chop information in separate mind bites, our psyche and our human relations will also be in pieces. That's already, in a way, artificial language and artificial intelligence compared to what Buddha would say, or Jesus, or yoga, or any of the teachers when you enter the unified field. That language is not chop anymore. It's not according to my will to put down sentences and put pieces together, right? That's artificial. It's up to me to say Socrates is or isn't wise. Sun is shining. Haverford is a college. I am a man. But when you tap the zone, it does you. You don't do yoga. You allow yoga to move you when you're zoning. So the language of zoning is organic. It's integral. And the great first teachers are trying to get us to go from a more constructed by my ego, I'm calling the shots, or my cult, my tribe, my group of people. We're in a conspiracy with this worldview that we've got. My narrative wins. That's my view of reality. Don't challenge me. That has a certain artificial use of reason that has not been clean because we didn't see the contrast with integral reason, holistic reason, which is not picturing facts. But when I enter into double bracket time, if I leave single bracket time, we're what? Past is past, done. Future is over there, not yet. Present, I can't get it, moves. So past, present, future are pieces, are building blocks. But when you go into now time, it meets. Because why? Every point in the unified field, because it's infinite and unbreakable. When you're in the logosphere, the Om sphere, the Christ sphere, the Buddha, Yahweh, the Allah, it's infinite unity with diversity. So that language, that code, which has been missing, the Logos code, when you get into that language and literacy, you see the organic flow. You're in peak performance. You're in the zone. If you could speak Christ language, not Christ. Jesus is not here. He was Christ. Buddha is not here. That's all we know. So when we download what we hear from the scriptures into where we are, we don't realize we're lost in translation. Artificial intelligence is old. It's not amplified with a computer. And the irony of it, for me, in this respect, in first philosophy, is that what we're calling artificial intelligence now, based upon our everyday normal culture, is the same code. It's information code. And it's being amplified and accelerated in all kinds of magical ways with the technology. So one of the great questions people are struggling with is, we're in danger of AI. We've got to really get constraints and so forth. But wait a minute. What is the danger? If we've been already using that artificial code compared to the integral, more organic human code, where we find love and human relations and nonviolence, objectifying one another, and can have democracy and thriving culture in that space, then can a computer be a person? Big question. Is there a clear mark-off? Answer is yes. How do you know that? My son, who's a brilliant yoga teacher and singer-songwriter, decided to have a dialogue with AI a week ago. It was very interesting. And he started to ask it questions. It was brilliant. AI was brilliant in answering him. But when he pressed the point, are you a person? Oh, I can't do that. What is a person? The human being, philosophers, that's freedom. Agency is not in the Lego space, it's in the logosphere, right? What's that? That is when you are in a deeper consciousness that cannot be programmed in any kind of mechanical code. When you got the code, computers can do better than us here. It can outsmart us in our own game. It can fast forward. We know that. So we're being humbled by our own technologies, which is using the code better than we do.
But what happens when we stop that free agency and submit to computers, and let AI think for us? When your students come to class and they submit a paper that's written by AI and they don't use that creativity and that free will and ergo ethical implications.
Brilliant question. Yeah, let's just look at that. That's a brilliant question. I was thinking recently, when I have my teaching, I realized if I'm going to be a global philosopher in code education, which is a new level of education, code meaning you better face code. I call it code education, not just co-ed, but code ed, right? And it's not just a virus. It's a code vid. It's a pandemic code that we're using with a virus. And so if a student were to use AI or plagiarize and submit this, what would I do? She's cheating herself. He's cheating himself by doing that. My classes, I call them laboratory, philosophy labs. If you're going to sign up with Gangadean and come into this classroom, I've been over 50 years here. I'm expecting you to be willing to check in, not just my body here, but I'm willing to check out my mind operating process. Because when we go into first philosophy, we're going to read the Gita, we're going to read Descartes' meditations on first philosophy. You better be willing to question your deepest habits of mind. And that's your lab. The problem set, if you're walking into this class, is to mind your minding. Can you be in the zone for an hour and a half with me? Every time you check in, I want you to show up. Not just my body's in the room, but I'm willing to do the experiment of checking out my codes of my mind. And it's amazing the results I get. Their eyes start to brighten. They begin to see what they never saw before in their life. They've been in the single bracket code culture all their life. And just to read the text and say, wow, that Lord Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. That's us. He's coaching us to upscript into the Om space. Socrates is saying, leave the caves of ignorance and come into the Logos, into the light of reason. Jesus, unless you die, you can't be born. Buddha, we've got to separate from the code of suffering, enter the Buddha space. That coaching is going on for 2,500 years. And so I want my students to have that experience. My courses are packed. Students line up. I limit my class to 30, 100 sign up. And the computer throws them out. There we go. Artificial intelligence, arbitrarily, and science 30. And that's what I live with.
You've spent most of your academic career, 56 years at Haverford College outside of Philadelphia. What factors contributed to your enduring commitment to Haverford?
That's a great question. And again, it's ambiguous. To Haverford or Haverfield? Which college are you in? Where are the founders are Quakers, Christian mystics, friends. It's not just Quakers. That's a nickname. Quakers are not just quaking, right? It's called the Society of the Friends of Truth. What truth? Think of Brent Franklin and the founding of the USA in Philadelphia, brotherly love, right? The Quakers were realizing that the revolution of Quakers coming from UK, Wales, to USA, the founding of America, were Christian mystics who look, it's not just the Reformation. It's not the Pope. It's not the minister. It's not the church. It's not the crucifix. It's not the scripture. It's here. Christ, God, is here in every person. That was a breakthrough of Quaker. And let's found a college to cultivate that. That's when I came to Haverford. That's a college I came to. And Rufus Jones was a great Quaker philosopher who founded my department. Nevertheless, over the decades, as I began to discover the code shift, I began to hit deep resistance because if you dare call out the academic mind and the wider American culture as still not facing the code issue and conflating the higher code of wisdom down into the chaos of the code, right? And that's what we call academic liberal arts and philosophy in the box. I said, no, if you're going to get wisdom, you've got to look at that. That's going to create a lot of turbulence. So which Haverford am I committed to? The Haverford that's been dominated by the regime of single bracket academic thinking that I think has intrinsic violence because we objectify each other, we fragment, we silo, we break into departments and compartments and specialization more and more, and we're educating our students. That to me is an abuse. I'm trying to stop it, but I'm not alone. I'm standing with the wisdom of the planet. I'm standing with the Quakers who founded the college. So my challenge to answer your questions, am I going to walk on single bracket campus or walk on the campus? Am I going to go into a single bracket building or go into Founders Hall and hold the founder space, the Quaker light, the light of reason? And so when you say what sustained me over these decades, it wasn't easy and hasn't been easy to interface with that. At first, philosophers always got a lot of turbulence around them. Jesus wasn't treated well. Socrates was given poison, right? What did Ashok get? I won't say. But here I am. What's my passion? We're talking about the future of humanity. And if I can here for my students and help to open up a space for them to investigate the rest of their lives to say, am I going to live here? Or is there a deeper version of myself where I can have the love and the democracy and human relations, the nonviolence, finally? So I jokingly say, you're called Gen Z, the last Gen generation. Can you flip it now and become Zen G, the Zen generation? I like that call.
Could you share with us some of your most cherished memories or formative experiences from growing up in Trinidad and how they've influenced your perspectives on philosophy and spirituality?
It's a long story, but I'd like to honor the moment here. When I was born in Trinidad, my family was from India. And my grandfather, I'll say, was very deeply committed to Indian spirituality and was a leader in bringing the texts over and taking them out to the villages as the Indian population grew, of people who indentured themselves to come and find new horizons as immigrants. And that's my first 5 years. And we went to Jamaica. I lived in Kingston, a couple of houses over from the Marleys on Hope Road. I didn't know him then. He's probably one of the kids we played with. But then I came to New York in 1951. I was 11 years old. I won't give away my age. And my father was already trying to introduce yoga to America. He was self-taught, a very powerful father. But I was raised in a Christian school in the West Indies. So I went to a Christian school in the Commonwealth. Remember, we sang to the Queen. I played cricket. So I came from a different world in Jamaica. And I came to New York, and wow, what a change growing up in the New York City. And fast forward, when I had that experience as a boy walking the call of Logos, stay in the universal light, which I didn't understand. That was all part of my journey. In fact, the family is gifted because we came with a visitor visa, and that means after 3 months you have to leave. And my father got extensions to keep us, but then the customs department said, no, you have to leave. So we had tickets to leave on Queen Mary to England and leave the United States. But my father got in touch with a congressperson from New York City who introduced a bill in Congress because Eisenhower wanted to build better relations with India. And since my father was bringing Indian culture, there's a bill in Congress passed to save the Gangadean family to keep us in the country. I was very glad to stay. It made a difference in my life. I was raised between cultures with a gentle Indian background haunting me, but not believing Hindu, but also raised in a Christian space and open to the teachings of Christ and the British culture, the Commonwealth, and cricket, and all of that I was raised in. So I was between cultures. And so I had to figure out my identity when I came to America. Who am I? My name is Ashok, my last name Gangadean. I'm obviously foreign. And even though with the new bill in Congress we became citizens, after years people say, where are you from? I said, America. I said, no, you're Indian. I said, no, America. I was looking at cowboy and Indian movies as a boy. Television was just invented. The Lone Ranger and Tonto, and he was Indian. But I like the cowboy. So who am I rooting for? The cowboy or the Indian? But that's the West Indian, not the East Indian. When I went to India finally in 1971 for the first time to say, am I Indian? Is that my homeland, my motherland? And I really wanted to belong. And I went to see motherland, and even though I looked Indian and dressed Indian in quotes, people said, you're American, aren't you? So in India, they say, you're American. In America, they say, you're Indian. So I had to figure out, where do I belong? Where's my home? And that's when I discovered homeland, the deeper space. I'm a global sapient. I'm a global being. My philosophy was saying, get to the deeper space so we can have our own ID. My predication story, person is beyond and deeper than that. And so it was a big deal trying to find, who are you, Ashok? What is your citizenship? Are you USA or are you USA? Where are you? And isn't that the land that Martin Luther King says, I've seen the other side. I may not get there with you. Where is that with you? Is there a single bracket USA or a US of A? One nation under Logos indivisible. Have we found that yet? So when I began to read the Declaration of Independence, years later with sensitivity to which code are you in and to know the wisdom of the planet, 2,500 years, and European Enlightenment was a self-evident truth. And I read it with fresh eyes. I said, damn, these elders, as difficult and problematic as they were, having slaves and all that, they were tapping the Logos. Listen to what they say. In the course of events, whatever arrangements bring us and tie us one to another, if it violates our dignity and independence, we must separate. That's the separation anxiety. That's all the great wisdom. So you got to separate from this, enter into the high land. The second point was we hold these truths to be self-evident. What's that? Logos axioms. That life, liberty, being is endowed by the source. That's who we are. Thirdly, we form governments to protect that human being. And fourthly, if at any time, this is why it goes beyond the British and the market, if at any time your form of political life is violating your independence, your dignity, you must separate and renew until we get it right and form a new government and self-governance where we can protect that person. And I look and say, wow, we haven't done that. That's the unfinished American Revolution. I have a series on my website called 7076 Now, our unfinished American R-Evolution. Because we got to upgrade ourselves. We got to make that crossing people. And now it's really bad. The virus is really strong in America. We didn't get the brutish out. And that's a call for separation. So is our political arrangement in civic space now violating our dignity and freedom and nobility? That's back to the AI. Or are we living in Google space as a culture and objectifying each other? What's up with that? That all comes out in our series with my son.
What inspired you to embark on the Awakening Mind series? And can you share any revelations or insights you encountered when you developed the series?
Right now, in the New Age culture, everyone's talking about awakening. Everyone has their websites, their gurus, their teachers, their life coaches, calling for awakening consciousness and so forth. And we're doing yoga, which is great, not to put it down, but the yoga of yoga.
Everybody's reaching for something. They just
Yes.
don't know what it is.
Awakening the mind, just to finish that thought, is that when I began to see as a philosopher, first philosophy is the global attempt of all these great scriptures and traditions to get to ground zero, to first base, to what is first. And what is it? Being. And being is infinite. And it's infinitely connected. They're all getting that in different ways. That's awakened mind. So awakening the mind in the Lego space is not yet fully awakened. That's why my website is called Awakening Mind. And that's why I'm the professor of global philosophy. What is global? Global is really going into the zone. Why? Because when you realize a logos, the light of reason is infinite. It's a source of all narratives. That's a game changer. You can't silo these wisdom teachings. They're connected. When you realize that and drop the silos, wow, there's a floodgate opens up. That's the awakened mind. And that's a new frontier that's waiting for us. And so we could use all that language in our everyday Google space, but it's not capturing true awakening, which is a code shift. And if you don't even know what the code is because they haven't been introduced, then we can think in the conflated chaos that I'm doing awakening, I'm doing wisdom, I'm doing enlightenment, I'm doing democracy, I'm doing ethics, I'm doing love. It's not codependent, it's co-independent. When you go into the deep space, every person is unique. There's no other René, there's no other Joe'l. Absolutely unique in the infinite flow. That's diversity. The double bracket unit is pluribus on the ground floor. Infinite is infinitely diverse, and it's held together, you can't break it. So when you cross, if you can cross from this zone that has Lego pieces into the flow of the zone, you need a higher mind operating process to handle it. And we haven't gotten that yet.
Can you elaborate on the concept of global enlightenment or wisdom and its significance in today's world, and how does it differ from conventional wisdom?
Where we are now in code chaos, we haven't really gotten the code markers yet. I've been trying to bring this up for 25 years. Once I saw it in the early 90s, my passion has been code education to bring it onto the radar for a mass culture. And where we are in that space, all of the attempts to get to that deeper space is hitting a glass ceiling that we don't understand. Why? Because we haven't seen the code and the code effect. The single bracket code cuts us off intrinsically from deeper access. Why? Because it chops silos, Legos, and separates and polarizes, and we didn't get it. We don't understand it. We think we're okay. But we haven't got the medical effects of being in the single bracket space. The question of what is global enlightenment? Again, global space is not just global in here. We look at all the different worldviews and cultures we have. Oh, I'm going to stand and generalize. They're all in the silo places. No, you have to break the silo barrier to get into global space, which is what? The source of all. Why? Because being is infinitely connected. And it's the source of all narratives. Can you go here from pro-choice, pro-life? Let's go deeper into dialogue, deep dialogue. Wow, pro-choice and pro-life. Broken here. We can begin to see each other in a new way. Wow, if I'm pro-life, then why am I taking away your choice? If I'm pro-choice, why am I taking away your life? Why? Because life and choice begin to meet. Wow. If I'm Big Bang here and Genesis here, is God the source of the universe, or is it Big Bang? Let's go deeper into deep dialogue, which means dialogue means dialogos. Let's go through the logos. Wow, our worlds are connected. I didn't see it. Maybe let there be light is the Big Bang. Whoa, we were divided in silos, but now we can begin to see real profound connections and bridges. Maybe we can start talking and living with each other. That's global enlightenment. When the global lights open up, but you can't get global in a cave mind. In this form of reason, it's great as it is. Single bracket reason has to grow into a double bracket integral calculus of deep dialogue. And that's where the human begins to flourish. We're Logos kids. The call of America is not to stay in the separate Google space, but to come into one nation under Logos indivisible with liberty and justice for all. That's double bracket USA. That's global enlightenment. It's new. Global has very powerful meaning. It means tap the Logos. Global means the source of all of our diverse cultures and worlds and narratives, scriptures, disciplines. You can do liberal arts here with all the divided fields, but when you get into the deep space, the universe is vibrating. It's got frequency, and it's got measures and rhyme and reason. They're connected in the deep space. I couldn't see that before in the Lego separated spaces of liberal arts.
What do you perceive as the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern understanding when it comes to a global enlightenment?
So that's exactly my point, because wow, once you break out of all these silos, I'm going to keep Buddha over here. He said that. Nietzsche said so-and-so. Jean-Paul Sartre said so-and-so. Socrates says, leave the cave. Descartes said, I am. And they're all in silos, as if, okay, I'm glad these. No, that makes it profound when Descartes says, or Socrates speak, or Jesus says, unless you die, and Buddha says, we're suffering. And if you just keep them in silos, you kill them. To silo is to silence. But if you open up the floodgates, could it be all connected from a common power and source? It's a whole new game now. If you can make that switch. Is this first? No, this is derivative philosophy. First philosophy is getting to the ground floor. And when you happen, the lights go on, which is enlightenment. It's the light of reason. It's what they call European enlightenment or Eastern enlightenment or Southern or Northern, right? Is the lights are on. What's when you're tapping the lowest light? You're having a human understanding, an intelligence, science. You can have a culture. You can become a human on our way to becoming mature species. What I loved in your question is, does classical ancient wisdom speak to us today? That's the point I'm making. Once you open the floodgates, you say, wow, 2,500 years, I can hear Buddha now. I can hear Jesus. I can hear Moses at the burning bush. I can see Muhammad surrender to Allah. Put Allah first. Once you open the ancient, it breaks a time barrier and becomes current wisdom for us.
Do you think there's been a breakdown in society, or that we've not just reached that level yet of what you're talking about?
You're great partners here in calling out questions. Is the breakdown new? This is very important. When you get the double bracket, first philosophy, it gives you a medical understanding of what's going on here that you can't see within it. When we're in the divided space, we can't see the integral, holistic medical diagnostic. And what you'll find here is that this code that's buried, that we haven't fully seen for centuries, and we're laboring under it, and we can't break it and break through it and leave it behind and detach until we see it. And that's what I'm seeking to do for the first time in this way, by bringing out the markers to help us do that. The fragmentation was always there. We're always in Google space. We're always in mind bites. We're always in atomic units. We've been doing it for centuries. That's why Buddha saw it centuries ago, that we're living in a chopped space, people. And if you're a Lego entity, an atomic piece, and if you think you got your own being and you're doing it, you're wrong. You can't be without being. Being is holding you. And until you honor the first axiom, reality is a unified field. And you can't be outside of being. But if you're separating with your mind operating malpractice, you're going to hurt. You're going to have ill being. So our teachers saw it centuries ago that we're fragmented. But fast forward 2,500 years. The founders of the USA leaving and coming across the ocean, even that was a terrible situation with genocide going on. And the founding in Philadelphia and saying, you got to separate from whatever, compromise our independence and nobility. And we didn't hear it correctly. The Civil War was just one moment of cracking, but it's been lurking constantly. And Lincoln was trying to have a more perfect union. In order to form a more perfect union, establish just that kind of talk, he was trying to say, don't split, folks. Let's find a more perfect union. That echoed constantly in the discourse of America. So what's going on medically when you see it from the Logos medical vision, first wisdom, because wisdom is here, not here, then you can say, wow, the virus is getting more pronounced now. Look at America. We can't hide it anymore. What was underground, it's out in the open, and it looks crazy. It looks insane. And people in the media are trying to understand it. If you listen to Fox, you get one reading. If you listen to Morning Joe and Mika and CNN, you get a different reading. And people realize something crazy is going on. And democracy is gone now. We're living in a post-truth world. You have no common truth or facts. It's terrible. It's severe. This is inevitable. The virus is going to get stronger until we realize it. So what is the vote? The vote is not to elect Biden and save democracy. And this comes out in our series, Physics Now. Each of us has to now become a founder, a co-founder of USA, and decide in a deeper vote. You can vote here for one party or the next or independent, but you're still here. But to vote up and say, I'm going to become a citizen, the Zen-G, the Zen generation, the mindful generation, we better grow up now because we're in danger. And the danger is existential. It means our being cannot survive. Our culture is our being. And our culture comes from a mind operating code. And it's reached a point of severity. We're in danger of a meltdown that we can't sustain it in any way because we've been living in global space all along. All of our worldviews and diversity and orientations and so forth. And yet we don't have the capacity to find the deep dialogue to save the nation. So if I were running for president, I would call out the vote. Are you going to vote here? We can't do this anymore, right? So when we say democracy is at risk, democracy is up here. It's double bracket. It's not egocracy. It's not legocracy. It's logos, demos, we the people.
The world seems especially sad and angry right now, less patient, from the highways to the grocery line to the family dinner table to the office. We are divided, impatient. It seemed to get worse during and after COVID. Has our consciousness, our humanity, our empathy been irrevocably damaged? Yesterday, when I was researching, I was thinking about conflicts across the world, and there's actually a global conflict tracker, and I didn't even know this existed. There are 25 areas of global conflict right now across the world. What are your thoughts?
I love that you're getting right to the cutting edge now of where we are in a code crisis. Not only getting worse, and not only there's 25 global conflicts, everything is a conflict. Why? Because the code, the operating code, by making separate units and cutting us off from the link. To be linked in, you've got to go into the unified field where you can find now the common human relations, and nonviolence with nature is sacred. And everything is sacred. We've got logophobia, right? And if you call it we've got homophobia. We were scared of the unity and the higher self. We have autophobia. I know it sounds strange, but when you're used to this version of yourself and each other and your culture, and some crazy first philosopher for 2,500 years is calling us to, you got to separate us and go into the higher unified field of yoga, of Tao, of ethics, of leave the cave into the logos, and so forth. No way. So there's a profound phobia. Then I start to itemize how many pathologies, this is a great question, René. How many pathologies, existential pathologies, can we discern? Looking in the American lab, gun violence, ethnic cleansing, Holocaust, genocide, misogyny, misology, hatred of reason, the degradation of the culture, of the society, climate change, global warming, nuclear threats, poverty, corruption in government, on and on. What's going on? They all stem, could it be medically? They're stemming from the virus we're carrying, of fragmentation. That's cutting ourselves off from ourself. We're self-cutting. We're in a violent place. And how do you enumerate how many forms of violence we're going to find? You said beautifully, going to work. What's the workplace like? We want diversity, inclusivity, and equality there. But diversity here puts you in your separate cubicle. You're not connecting in the deep space. Double bracket diversity. When you tap that space, that is beyond your packaging that we have artificially. The point is where you go to the workplace, you go to the voting place, it's violent there. It's threatening. And the whole electoral process is contaminated. The civic space is fragmented and busted. And you say, is it irrevocable? No. Why? As bad as the virus has gotten now, to a flaming point and a crisis medically, we're always surrounded by the double bracket. Life is always held by the double bracket space.
How can individuals and communities leverage principles of global wisdom to foster greater harmony and cooperation on a global scale?
Wow, that is a big question in terms of renovating the civic space of culture. And to me, raising our children with code sensitivity and lensitivity to realize that when you're processing the world, you're seeing it with your lens. The culture's feeding your lens and cultivating it, and you could have multiple lenses. I could say I'm a believing Christian, and that's one of my narratives, but also in science, I'm a theoretical physicist, and I'm working in the Big Bang and the expanding universe. And I'm also a civic American. I'm keeping my religion out of my political life, but I'm feeling stresses by multiple personalities. And I'm seeing my therapist, and she's a Jungian. And she's saying I've got an anima and the animus and the male and female energy, and I've got to integrate it. And now I'm really going crazy. So I'm going to try to do some yoga and really chill out. All of these are different worlds. That's a normal one person with different IDs and not knowing how to realize that if I can't have inner dialogue across my multiple perspectives and lenses with lensitivity, then I'm going to be in pieces. I'm going to be fragmented. I'm going to be siloed in myself. How can I be a healthy, thriving person with well-being? So your question is great. How do you raise your children? Start right there. When you realize the code issue, am I inadvertently just cultivating, this is the word culture. Am I cultivating my kids and raising them to breathe in the everyday code of the culture unwittingly, uncritically? Or do I realize that you're damaging them by objectifying them and giving them a code that's more mechanical and not organic and deep and going to be well-being? Do you want to raise your children with codal awareness in light of the wisdom of the planet and the great scriptures and help them to develop the dance between intercode intelligence? Once you begin to get that and realize we could be abusing ourselves and our kids with the code that we're using, we're slashing each other and ourselves. And if we can get that medical issue out front and center and people begin to get code awareness and begin to break the trance, we have to break the trance. And your question, Joel, implies that if we can do that in a community, whether liberal arts education, high school education, parenting, whatever it is, whatever walk of life, whatever groups you're in, your religion, Christianity, can you see there's a deeper way to love God and be in Christ, a deeper way to be a Jew, a deeper way to be a Muslim and surrender to Allah? And that our great mystics, Sufi mystics like Rumi and Ibn Arabi were calling out the logos of Allah? If all of these communities can say, wow, that's a Hindu, that's a Buddhist, that is a Tao. Once we begin to see the importance medically of the code shift and take responsibility for that, we then have a collective duty in not damaging our children, ourselves, and the environment. Because now you see in the zone that nature is sacred. It's the body of Logos. It's the body of Christ. It's the body of God. Nature is divine energy. We are divine beings, as the Quakers suggest. God in every person. Why aren't we living that? So that would become the supreme moment of upgrading our human family. And that's what I'm, with all my passion, seeking to do. Even though I've been teaching for 56 years, I feel I'm a beginner, ready to start. I can't afford to die. I know I can die at any moment. But I feel I've got to be here to help reach that critical mass, because the future of our human family and our well-being has reached such a dangerous point. It's not irreparable, René. It's reparable, educable. We can educate it. But we've got to break the trance pronto.
Before we go to our speed round, what's next? What's on the horizon for you? And where our listeners can learn more about you and the Awakening Mind?
One word, awakeningmind.org. I have many video presentations over the decades, bringing the top intelligentsia leaders, best-selling authors to Haverford College on stage with them, recorded there. There's 7 episodes of 76 Now with my son, beautiful performing artists with the songs, with the dialogues with him to help open up to see the America that wishes to happen.
We do a speed round at the end just to get to know our guests in a little bit different way. I'll start with the first question. What was your first job?
My first job is just at home. We had goats and chickens in Jamaica. And one of my first jobs for my father, take care of the goats, take them out to graze, take them up in the mountain. You have to do that and milk the goats in the morning and gather the eggs from the chicken coop and rake up the leaves outside and plow the garden and grow some things in Jamaica. I milked the goats in the morning. We lived on goat's milk and so forth. I came to New York, as I said, my first job delivering alcohol as a delivery boy for a liquor store.
I love it. Goat herder
Wow.
and delivery boy. That's great.
Don't tell anyone.
If you could get the chance to chat with 3 famous people in history, who would you choose and why?
It's going to be a hard choice between Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad. I would say, and not to be prejudiced, I feel that the language of Jesus is the Logos in the flesh. I would love to hang out with Jesus because I feel that when John left the Hebraic, first went to the Logos, the Hellenistic, that was a huge moment. I would love to be able to have a conversation with Jesus. And I feel I do, because when you enter the double track space, those teachers are here. They're not far away. So I don't have to give up the others. I would love to hang out with Moses at the burning bush. I would love to be with Muhammad when Gabriel appears. He receives the Quran. I would love to be Rumi when he says there's a field beyond judgment of right and wrong. Meet me there in that field. Wow. But let's leave that. Let's just take one from that Abrahamic Jesus. But when I go to India, Nagarjuna was a great genius in the Buddha tradition because he came centuries after Buddha. And he saw that the politics of Buddha's teaching, the academies, the monasteries, were still caught in polarization. And he opened up a radical way to get into the unified field. The middle way, he's called the Madhyamika, the middle way teacher, who opened the middle way, which was historic. To know Nagarjuna, right? I would want to hang out with Nagarjuna, just watch how he was opening up the middle field to the logos, right? To emptiness, the field of being. So he'd be on my list. The other philosopher, I think there's so many in the European journey. I could say Socrates, but that's almost really, Socrates is my hero. He gave his life to logos. He drank hemlock or was poison to stop the sophistry of the time. Let's go and just stop at René Descartes. Meditations on First Philosophy. He was breaking out of the single bracket space. He didn't know it. He was a pioneer. Meditations on First Philosophy. He was trying to get the universal grammar. And when he stepped out, he said he could doubt everything in the everyday life. He was a great mathematical genius, opened up analytical geometry. But still, he said, even math can be wrong. I can be deceived. And he says, I'm stepping back. And he said, I am. I exist. But interpreters read him back in the predication space, even though he was meditating. He's been misunderstood badly. I'd like to meet the guy and say, hey, I saw you. You're opening up the space into the deep, double bracket. You're a pioneer. Let's have a beer together, smoke a cigar.
We're back to your childhood. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
When I was an undergraduate at City College of New York, my father arbitrarily said, Ashok, you should be a chemical engineer. Before that, he wanted me to be a boxer. And I was getting training in boxing because he thought Joe Louis was a great hero and he would love one of his sons. And I was more athletically inclined. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. I wanted to try for the Dodgers, and I was working out. And in City College, I was on the decathlon. So I really wanted to do professional athletics. But I also wanted to be a singer because Johnny Mathis had a voice that just moved me so deeply. And I said, I want to do that. And so I have many callings. But when I was at City College, my dad said, okay, Ashok, you won't be a boxer, but at least be a chemical engineer. I hated that environment. And someone said there's a teacher on South Campus, Professor Irani, a Zoroastrian. He's brilliant. He's in philosophy. Go check him out. And I went down. I wasn't registered. I was cutting my classes of physics and mathematics and chemistry in the North Campus. And I flunked out of school because of that. Yeah, I don't care what my father says. I love what this man is teaching. He even knew Einstein at Princeton. And there's wisdom here. And I was just feeling that call. I didn't know that was philosophy. So when I had to choose a major, I was really going through profound agony. Because on the one hand, I felt to follow the universal light, all of these professions. I want to be an athlete. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a singer. I was going crazy. Why? Because I knew if I choose a major, I'm going to put myself in a box of one profession. I was walking down in 8th Street in the village of New York City and going into a Marlboro's bookstore and going crazy, seeing all of these men and women, geniuses of the ages. And I felt called. So it was terrible for me to choose a major. But then I felt philosophy at least keeps it open for all of these fields. You can have the philosophy of sports. You could have the philosophy of law, philosophy of science, philosophy of wisdom, philosophy of ethics, and so forth. So I can breathe. Philosophy kept the doors open. So that's why I was led to philosophy.
I love it. I learned something about you today.
Ashok, our last speed round question. What would you name this current chapter of your life?
Good. It was very hard for me to see, Joel, that when I was being gifted by Sophia, an ultimate notation marker to disentangle the conflated codes for centuries on behalf of our great first teachers, I felt deeply blessed and honored, and therefore a duty to honor the gift of the code shifters, the markers that we never had before. That really allowed me to feel comfortable being a global philosopher for the first time. And so I think this stage of my life, I feel my life is beginning now, after all these decades. Strange to say, as a late bloomer, that what I'm being asked to do by Sophia, and my love of Sophia, which is what philosophy is, lover of Sophia, Philosophia, is to bring the code out on behalf of Logos, to fulfill the great teachers of the ages and scriptures What a blessing to have to stand on their shoulders with them and held by them to fulfill to the next step, to have code education, to wake up the planet. So a global teacher is what I see myself as. And I mean, a double bracket teacher is about to appear. And it's my duty to do that with all my heart on behalf of the teachers I serve. And I'm not personally involved in it. So I see I'm entering now a stage of being an arriving global teacher to take the wisdom down to the next essential level, which is to open up the global space, the portal to presence, whatever name you give for that.
The question down the lane segment is one where we ask each guest to provide a question for our next guest. And so our last interview was with two people, and they each provided a question for you. So I'll ask you the first question. Have you tried all the Doritos flavors, especially the tangy barbecue?
Doritos are great. And I have tried 2 or 3 different options when I was out in Seattle recently. And the tangy one is really good. But here's a point. Whatever you taste, you could taste it here or you can taste it here. Everything, single bracket or double bracket, I would say to this person. Not with your ego mouth and lips, but as a rite of passage, as a sacrament, to see the magnificence in a Dorito, right? You ain't seen nothing yet. And then the different flavors, you realize you could even find the common ground of those flavors in a Dorito. And it goes even beyond a single bracket Dorito. What would a double bracket Dorito taste like? That would be my answer.
I would guess tangy barbecue.
Okay. I think you're right.
Now I want to have a Dorito or two.
That's my point.
I don't really eat them, but I want to. Now I want to eat it in a double bracket space.
There you go. That's the point.
Describe yourself in one word.
Lover. I would love to be a lover.
It's been a sincere pleasure to have you on Podcetera. Thank you for spending time with us. It's been great to reconnect.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you on the show.
It's been a great reunion for us, and I love the creativity of how you've designed this, and I'm deeply impressed with the level and depth of your questions, because I felt very comfortable with you, and it gave me a chance to speak my mind with a certain passion and bring things together in a very unique way, and I'm very grateful for that. So I really think it's a pleasure dancing with you both.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share Podcetera. And be sure to follow and like the series wherever you enjoy podcasts.
For Podcetera, I'm René Lego.
And I'm Joël Ludovich. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.